Bill Gusky. I'm an artist in sort of the broadest sense. I think of it as really being a synthesist, um, bringing together lots of things. I work in visual art in a lot of different medium. On my website, you'll see a lot of painting. You can also find, if you look around for it, different things I've done in video, and uh, I've done a little photography. I'm doing a lot of writing these days. I've always written all along throughout my career. I'm from the American Midwest. I grew up in St. Louis County in Missouri until age 14 when we moved to Connecticut. And since then, I've lived up and down the East Coast of America. In my practice, which a lot of people don't like to say that, a lot of artists are like, don't say practice, it sounds like you're a dentist or something. But I think it's a really valid term. In my practice of art making, I range widely. I do this because I find it natural. As a child, I found that I would spend about half the year um, doing realistic painting and the other half of the year making cartoons of various kinds. I presumed growing up that I would be poor because I knew nobody who cared about art, um, who did anything with it, who made a living by it. My parents, my whole background is very middle class to lower middle class. And consequently, I sort of stumbled into different kinds of uh, uh, media. I stumbled into children's media in the 1990s and found I was quite good at it. I learned how to make computer art. I learned how to draw and paint on computers and to animate and to write. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm painting on my own. So all of these things kind of come together. The painting gives to whatever I happen to be doing as a day job to earn money, and that contributes back. And this is sort of this larger sense I have of a whole life practice that comes together. Um, and for what it's worth, there's a lot more to say about that. I don't know. Did I do okay? You want me to do it again?
No, you're doing good, fine.
Okay.
I noticed that you've been moving around a lot, not just in the United States, but also you've been to India, to other
Mhm.
places.
Yeah, that just sort of happened as well. I one of the smartest moves I ever made in life was I chose a life partner who is smarter than me, among other things. And she's a college professor, and she gets certain opportunities, and I tend to go along. For example, she studied, she was doing cancer research at Dartmouth College, and I had the whole access to the entire Dartmouth library during that time. And it was just unbelievable the things you discover in an old library like that. And so one of the things was she had an opportunity to go to India, and I did some outreaches locally to the University of Kalyani and a Professor Ray over there who runs the art department. And it was my honor to be invited to join a group of artists from India, most of them, I believe, from West Bengal, and give a presentation to their students. It was a royal blast and one of the highlights of my life and my career. Just a great time and very interesting and rich, and would love to go back. Okay, cool. My first year of art school was at a small art college in Connecticut called the Payer College of Art in Hampton, Connecticut. A lot of good illustrators went through there. At the time, as a late high school student, I was thinking, yeah, maybe illustration is what I want to do. What I found there the year I attended, which I did very well at that school, but I found that it was largely staffed by, with a few exceptions, artists who tended to be rather bitter. They seemed angry and resentful. Some of these people had been artists who were trained at Yale, but whose careers just never took off. I remember one in particular who painted with rollers. That was his thing, using rollers, and not to make abstractions, to make kind of semi-abstractions that were sort of based on realist images and things like this. And he just seemed very sullen. Others were downright angry, and we talk about how they didn't understand how they weren't happy with Picasso, but they weren't happy with, for example, a realistic artist like Andrew Wyeth as well, you know, and something seemed off about that whole experience. So I stepped away. Later on, I got married and uh, had a couple babies. And I mentioned my college professor wife. She said, we should go to somewhere and study where you can finish your degree and I can find more opportunities in what I'm doing. So we went to, I applied to Pratt Institute, got in, and we lived in married housing with two little babies. It was a decidedly non-traditional college experience. You know, I had sort of a burden of trying to earn money while I was there. Meanwhile, my wife's career started taking off. She found opportunities at Barnard College in their science lab, and I just roamed the city. I grew my hair out and my face out, you know, like I had a beard and stuff like that. I was young and had this big, long, ragged coat. So essentially, if you look as though you're sort of homeless in New York, you can go anywhere and nobody bothers you. And so I did. I traveled everywhere. This was in the '80s when it was a little shadier than it is now. Um, and I went all kinds of places and discovered all kinds of things. I worked for an artist named Reed Stowe, who was also an explorer, kind of an adventurer, and among other things, he'd painted with Basquiat and things like that. Um, and uh, you know, I had a lot of the same experiences a lot of college students have, but I sort of had this other situation where I had people that I was taking care of. So for whatever it's worth, it was rich. It was a very rich experience, and I worked with really interesting artists. Among them, Rudolf Baranik, Cyrilla Mozenter, do I pronounce it? Cyrilla Mozenter, who lives in New York State now, and with a photographer named Phil Perkis. She was a big impact on how I look at art, how I see art as something that comes out of us. I mentioned earlier that growing up, I didn't have any sense that art making was a viable life. I didn't believe, because I didn't know anybody who bought or used art paintings, that that would ever be a viable kind of a life for me. I just presumed I'd be poor. And Cyrilla sort of helped me see how how art making is this vocation that comes out of us, and that when it's real, when it's genuine, it becomes what you are. It calls you, and you'll just do it anyway. And I find that that's foundational to everything I do and every way I think about art. Well, this was, you know, here are these things. I presumed I'd be poor and kind of was for a while. And then I saw, I went to a Best Buy store, I think, when in like 1994. And I saw this little computer program where you could click on little objects on the screen and they would do funny things. And I thought, hey, you know, I'm a cartoonist and that actually looks like fun. So I picked that up and applied to a few places, eventually got hired. And then I ripped and teared. I mean, I literally went in this 2 weeks after I was there, I gave the owner of the place 3 concepts. One of them was called A Day at the Beach with the Fazuli Family. And if you want to look it up, Fuzzzooly, Fazuli Family. He was delighted with the stuff. They took it to their to a company that was courting them. They were trying to get them to buy them. And that company liked them a lot, and they developed that idea and built it into a series of other ideas, into something called the Read and Play Library, and it became kind of a living books thing. So there was a little story that you would go through, and each of the pages in the story had images that you could click on, and sometimes you could play games on them. Well, anyway, that was a way to make money. So I had money. Money was coming in the windows actually for a while. It was kind of nice. It was a kind of complete surprise to me. Blew my mind. But that all came to an end in the late 2000, in the early 2000s, the early aughts, when the company was closed. It had been bought a few times and sold, and then eventually shut down, because that's what corporations do. And I, at that point, was looking at options. I started teaching high school, which was another royal blast. It just sort of stumbled into my lap, this opportunity to do this. And I followed it. I guess, this is all going to look kind of higgledy-piggledy, the way this all sort of tumbles out, the way my life kind of flows. And I guess it's worth mentioning very early on, shortly after high school, after that first year of college, where I felt like I was being taught by a bunch of bitter, angry people, I kind of underwent a bit of a spiritual journey, kind of a journey through. It's kind of spiritual. It's kind of insane, truth be told, kind of a little bout of insanity. But in coming out of that, one of my takeaways from that was this idea of listening deep inside, getting quiet, and trying to find your innermost leanings, the things that drove you to make art in the first place. Okay, the things that drove me to make art in the first place. These your innermost impetus, drive, the thing that got me started to making art in the first place, I found was perfectly capable of guiding me through everything else in life, if you just get quiet enough and listen. And that's kind of the situation. I was following some leads, just looking around, wondering what I should do next. And I found this little teeny tiny ad for, they were looking for a curriculum writer. Well, in making children's software, you kind of learn something about curriculum. It was a local school district. I applied. They called me back and said, you're overqualified for this, but we need somebody to teach kids media. How would you feel about that? And I've worked with children in the past. I thought, that sounds like fun. Let's do it. And I did. And again, it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was very impactful on my life. As I was doing that, I also started teaching college. And then there came a period where the state of Connecticut wants you to have a master's degree. So I went to the school and said, okay, it's looking like I'm going to get my master's degree at Mass Art. I said, can I have some kind of leave to do this? It's required. It's required for me to get this master's degree. How about some leave time to do it? Well, they wouldn't grant that. There was no provision for that. They insist you have this degree, but they won't make room for you to do it. So right about that time, another friend of mine who I had worked with in children's media before got a hold of me and asked me if I wanted to work for his small children's media company. I said, sounds like fun. So that's literally what happened for the next 2 years, I guess. I finished my master's degree with Mass Art. I worked part-time doing children's media again, having a great time, making up cool things, writing ideas, coming up with concepts and stories and things like that. The whole time, all this time I'm doing this, I'm also writing stories on my own. So anyway, that's kind of the story of how that happened. It was a limited residency program, happened on Cape Cod. It was a blast in Provincetown, and I greatly enjoyed it. So that's the name of that. I vividly remember being around 12 years old in a class at high school, doodling in a notebook. I think I was using pencils then, just, yellow pencil, writing in a notebook. Um, and I did a face, and the face came alive to me. I guess it's hard to describe because it's such a basic experience. I had suddenly done something that had the same kind of life that an expressive photographic image of a face will have. When you look at it, we've all had the experience. You look at a photograph of an image of someone who's undergoing some experience, and you look at it and you go, wow, it grabs you. And that's what my little drawing did. I was 12. And I was like, holy mackerel, what is this? And I tried to repeat the experience, and I did. And I find that this is an interesting rapport between me and the thing that comes out of the hand. And so that's part of the game, part of this play I have. It's a game of never landing. A friend of mine gave words to it. And a graphic artist I work with, he's actually much more than that, an art director named John Gibson, and he gave words to this thought I've had my whole life. I saw artists the whole time I was growing up who would find a style and they would stick with that style, and that was their style, and that was them, and that's what they did. And it was very mid 20th century. And I felt since my earliest days that seemed like such a prison. Why would I do that to myself? Why not sort of stay up a bit above it, never quite land, keep your feet just a little bit above the ground, and kind of keep kind of sailing around and finding things and forming things. And this play with faces is part of it. And I do a contest. Last night I doodled a bunch of things on a notebook. The thing I do for fun and laughs is screenwriting. A friend of mine used to do television with Warner Brothers in the early 90s. And a couple of years ago, she asked me if I wanted to work with her on writing TV. And so I make a lot of notes, which is what a lot of this is about right there. But then also at the bottom here, we have these guys. Whatever. Can you see them?
It's good.
Yeah. So little expressive, crazy guys. Now, these are obviously a little bit crazier than the thing I was talking to you about. But this stuff just kind of comes out. And it harkens to another thought that's kind of I suppose we all kind of live between different poles of different kinds at the same time, multiple sets at the same time. And one of the things, one of the poles that I kind of bounce between is the idea of institutional art and art in the wild. And of course, I was, when you're trained in like at Pratt, at Mass Art, when you're trained in a serious college, one of the things you get very impressed with and sort of ingrained with is this the vision of institutional art, because that's all there is. It's all they show you. It's rare that they actually take you out, somewhere where people are just kicking out art because it's what they're doing, because it comes out of them, and no one is interested in investing it. They don't know about it necessarily. The people don't necessarily even know that it's art. I remember I had a grandfather who was a house painter, and he had a basement out in Missouri. People tend to kind of finish their basements. They do things in their basements, and he'd gotten he'd bought a garbage can, and apparently it came in a box, and apparently the box was lined with these different shaped foam pieces. And he had taken these foam pieces and arranged them, glued them to the wall of his basement, and painted them different colors. He didn't have any pretense of being an artist. He did it because it just came out of him, because it was interesting and fun, and he enjoyed the experience. And that's really valid for me. And when I see particularly the way institutional art tends to flow, I'm thinking more and more that my own interests incline more towards art in the wild. And I try and let my own artwork come out of that more and more, even when I'm writing. Isn't that interesting? I would have never thought of my landscapes as geometric. Now I've got to look. Okay, well, all right, okay. I mean, here I am. I'm calling it landscape. It's a couple dogs. So, okay, so are you talking about, for example, when I look at the dog painting, I see sort of a square that's sort of, okay, yeah, right, asymmetric. Okay. All right. I'm seeing some geometry in, for example, the house paintings. There are kind of forms in the glacier and the clouds. All right, it's in there. Geometry is in there for sure, but it seems to work against. That's an interesting thought. I never really looked at it that way. It seems to work against organic forms. So I'm now when I go over to in my abstract work, yes, I mess around a lot with organic and geometric forms, sort of more clearly so. But in the painting, even when I'll give you well, no, actually I have some pretty sharp geometry in there too, don't I? All right. Well, I play it against organic forms, and I guess maybe that comes out of natural experience. Here I am right now, sort of this organic shape in this rectangular form. I've got rectangular shapes behind me. That's really palette is something I'm very interested in. I just finished. Finished. I've got a bunch of paintings that are a set I started this year, where I chose one color and went with it. And that actually started with these things. I have these notebooks that have watercolor paper in them, and I'm just going to kind of flick through one really fast for you. So, is there anything behind it? Yeah. Okay. Hang on. All right. So there's this, and then there's like this, and these are all like monochrome. So I choose one color, and I'm just dealing with this idea of growth from a source. It's very basic, super basic idea. Okay. And that was kind of to get back from this thing where you can find yourself, if you're not paying attention, sort of stumbling into a bunch of different palettes that are, you can call it palettes, but it's palette loosely defined. If you're throwing too many colors into something, you know what I'm saying? That it tends to make your work just look kind of janky. And I guess I sort of settle into things. My process is organic. It's organic. It really is. I start with an intuition of what I'm making at the time. Lately, a lot of abstract paintings, and an intuition towards a color, and I start with that. And if I feel like I want to palletize it and really bring it within a harmonic set of colors, then I'll do that as I'm working along. Even then, as you see with a lot of these watercolors I have under the category of landscape, it's not clean. I tend to let the colors kind of merge and mess around. I do a lot to first off, all of this watercolor is stuff I mix myself. I don't get it out of tubes. I get the pigment from a company called Gara Paint, and I mix it with gum arabic. So I'm mixing the paint to start with, and then I do a lot of degrading of the work. I'll sometimes go in with sandpaper or a wire brush. Sometimes I'll hit it with bleach, and it can really degrade the paper a lot. That's part of where I'm at in terms of these kinds of images. The sense of an image coalescing out of something, and an image also that is firm, dissolving back into something. I like this sort of a state of coming in, going out. It reminds me a lot of memory. So for whatever that's worth. inspiration is the way images and memory work in our lives, uh, and what we bring to them and what we bring out of them. The inspiration for individual images can come from a lot of things. I get a lot of inspiration from photos my family takes or has taken, or photos other people have taken. Sometimes I find images in websites that inspire paintings. I don't tend to paint directly after them, but they tend to inspire other paintings. I have a lot of images that I've taken in travel, images from my wife's family photo albums from when she was a child, um, images I sometimes take with my phone. Uh, I guess that pretty much, you know, that pretty much is where it comes from. Here I have one from a game show from Sri Lanka, I believe. So it can come from lots of different places.
Having children inspired you? Does this show in your art? Being a father?
Um, I guess I have some paintings that aren't on my website uh, of the children. Um, so it's in there. Um, I don't know that there's a direct line between that experience, because I don't know that I approached it. You know, you can go at it. You can go at it with a very firm idea. I am a father. As a father, this is how I am. I do certain things and I don't do other things. And there's some people that will literally, they'll wait to have children until they're very sure about how their life is running, and they have a lot of um, uh, things kind of lined up, and they're quite sure their income is steady and all that other stuff. We didn't. We were kids. We were kids working our lives out. We wanted to have children when we were young and rubbery, and had energy for them. And that was just our take at the time. I suppose it echoed the take of our parents, who may have just done it because it was more the fashion for them and their generation. But the upshot of that is that simply I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I simply did it. It was something I did, and it was an incredible privilege, and um, it was yet again one of those experiences that I gave to and that gave back, and did it very organically. I tried not to be heavy-handed about it, and um, I, it's one of those things. I mean, as a parent, there's no way you're going to parent without regret. It's impossible. You're going to have your bad day. You're going to have the year where there wasn't much money, and so you weren't able to buy the shoes until later, and things like that. Um, Pratt Institute, we didn't have, for a while, we didn't have medical insurance, so we were using the local clinics, and um, that's kind of a thing. You relinquish, when you take risks like that, you relinquish some privilege, and I don't know. I guess I don't know how to speak to it, because it was just something that I did that kind of came and went. And I miss it. I mean, it's hard to see the photos now and not miss when those kids are little. Okay, well, intimacy. Gosh, it comes out. We're getting into areas now when you start talking about things like that are sort of so subconscious. I don't really think about intimacy when I make art. What if it's there? It's going to come out of things like a sense of touch, um, uh, choices of colors, the way materials are used, and now we're talking visual art. I mean, I write as well, and it all comes out. Things like that will come out in choices. Intimacy, or for that matter, its opposite. Detachment, sure, that's definitely in some of my work. There are times when I intentionally detach from situations, from the world. Um, and there are a lot of times when I look back in retrospect and say, wow, I was kind of detached in that situation. I didn't really engage that situation, either with regret or perhaps with relief. Um, and this is, I think, comes from my early experience of learning to approach life intuitively. And I guess that's where that is. It happens and it doesn't. There are times when I feel as though I have perhaps a neurological disorder, a slight one, not major, um, but somewhat of one where I don't get human cues when I'm talking to people. I miss human cues. I've had people tell me later if someone has accompanied me in an interaction with another person. I've had this accompanied person tell me later, so why didn't you blah blah blah? I'd be like, what are you talking about? And they'll tell me all of these cues they were getting that weren't verbal. They were every other kind of human cue. And I'm like, I missed it, totally slipped by. So for what it's worth, and I think the idea of intimacy and detachment is involved in that. There's another funny thing too that happens sometimes, truth be told. Do you have time for this?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fine. There's another thing that sometimes happens. I will, again, working out of this just intuitive. I'll be sitting and talking with someone and I'm just following these inner cues because that's what I do. That's what I do. I'm just following these inner cues, talking to them, responding to what they're doing, listening, responding. And they'll tell me later, they'll say something that I said to them changed their entire view of something, changed their entire outlook, was an answer to something they badly needed to hear. I didn't have any idea. I didn't know. If you had asked me at the time, I'd said, well, I'm fairly detached. I'm trying to get through this conversation with this guy. It's not something I do. You see, I'm alone here right now. My wife is upstairs. Generally speaking, I spend most of my time alone. I did this as a child. Working with other people didn't really work with me. I was an oddball as a child, kind of an oddball. I really was. And out in the Midwest, and kids were kind of cruel. Actually, well, children are cruel. That's how that is. So that just pushed me to be more and more alone. And I spent a great deal of my time alone. After we moved, particularly to Connecticut, I was out in the woods a lot alone with a watercolor block, just painting often, not always. Sometimes just walking around, looking at things. So anything that people get out of me that's of any use tends to be intuitive. And that's, I guess, how that all kind of works for me. Forever, I don't know, you keyed that off and made me think about that. Stories first, and then I found that some of my funny stories lapsed into more feely stories, stories about experiences, stories that relate to experiences in earlier life, typically. But then I'm not writing about them intentionally, biographically. I'm casting another character, doing something kind of different, but that turns out to relate to that later. Again, working intuitively. Sometimes I'll write a stream of consciousness stuff that I would, I reluctantly call poetry. And you know, that part about not landing, that part about doing things intuitively, it's about discovery. I really like the idea of living in fairly constant discovery, which is also why I pretty much constantly work. There's very few times in my life when I'm not working. Even when if I'm watching TV, like if I'm watching a TV show, I'm looking at it and thinking about the writing. I'm thinking about the words that are coming out of it. When I'm playing words with friends and I'm putting words together, I often put together nonsense words. I put together things that actually don't make sense and don't get points because I'm looking at how the words look and discovering new things. This is this whole thing about us being synthesists. We're synthesizing meanings constantly. Things come in, we synthesize, things go out. And maybe the things that go out do something with people. And a lot of times that's delightful. Sometimes it'll just happen spontaneously. Sometimes you don't find out until years later that something did something. And a lot of times stuff never does anything for anyone. It's just something that we do. It calls us this life of synthesis. Something I wrote this morning because I was looking out this back window. What's your view here? Hang on a minute. Let me see what your actual view is here. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I got these windows out here, and this looks out onto a backyard that's mostly woods. And this morning I was sitting at that other workstation there, getting ready for this interview. And I heard some crows, and we had a nice, bright, sunny morning. And I heard the crows, and then I saw their shadows go across the trees. And it was an interesting experience, so I wrote about it briefly. And here's what I wrote. Excuse me. Late winter, yellow morning sun on sycamores, naked pines, cedar swarmed in vines, traced through now by the shadows of crows in flight. Just very simple stuff.
Do you also match, for each short story, do you do an illustration or a small painting?
I only did that recently. And the reason I did it was because I read somewhere that sometimes the people who edit collections of short stories and stuff like that get a kick out of seeing. I read somewhere that it struck me as an interesting thing to do. And I wrote a story about a little dog who becomes a psychologist. And I thought that would be fun to have some illustrations there. So I added some illustrations to that. And I've submitted it around. We'll see where it goes. Cross your fingers. Trying to get it printed. Aren't we all? Oh my God! Yeah. No, that was a fun show. It was by a guy named D. Dominic Lombardi, who's a fascinating artist in his own right, and it was my good fortune to become known to him back when I was doing my graduate work, and he included me in a show up at UMass Amherst, and it was fun. It was a fun show. What I figured out after a while was that I'm always looking at what are we really doing? Why am I bothering with all of this? You know, it certainly doesn't earn much money. It doesn't pay much. But I keep coming back to it again and again and again. What are we really doing? We're instruments. Your whole being, your entire being, your mind, if you consider yourself having a spirit, your physical body, what your physical body is trained to, this cloud of things around you that is that follows us and haunts us everywhere, our pasts, our intentions, our loves. These are instruments. We're instruments, and we're refining that. We spend our entire lives refining this instrument. I want to say refining it, not in the sense of making it pure and pure and pure. We're simply making it more and more and more of what it is, whatever that is. And that's ultimately what's really happening. My instrument is becoming more and more refined, and the work feeds into that, and the work comes out of that as well. And the work in all of its aspects, whether I'm writing something, whether I'm making a painting, whether I'm joking with the checkout clerk at the grocery store, you know, all of that, it all comes through. It's all part of this this thing. It all comes out of the instrument. I'm always productive. I found the pandemic was more about uh, adding stress. Pandemic added stress to the equation. Um, as somebody who needs a day job, I found that the pandemic sort of rearranged things so that I used to, for example, get up very early in the morning to avoid traffic, to drive to work, because I found if I waited to like rush hour to drive to work, it was just stressful and for no good reason. Um, so I would leave very early, and I owned the streets at that point, and come home earlier than usual. And I found that without having to do the drive anymore, my schedule changed. It became more organic. It began to flow more out of a natural life process. Um, Beyond that, I got to say, I'm pretty much still constantly doing something, whether it's painting, writing, day jobbing as I have to, things like that.
You said that as a child, as a boy, you were going to the woods and spending a long time there, sketching in your sketchbook. Do you still have time for that now, to just have time for yourself and go just, for you?
Oh, I insist on it. I absolutely insist. Yeah, absolutely. That was the root of everything. That was this all. Go one even further. I'll step you back even further. I mean, my experience of what people do in life comes from a family where my father would come home from work and read. He was always available. You could always ask him a question if you needed something or whatever. He'd talk to you. He'd close his book and talk to you, and you'd have his full attention. But when he was on his own, he was reading. He was doing things that interested him, and that was just my impression of what people do. You know, they do things that interest them. They follow their interests on their time. And what else are we supposed to be doing? So going into the woods was me following my interest. And sometimes I was, I would find horse bones sticking up out of the ground and start digging them up. All of these little experiences. I found an old dump that had an ancient piece of ancient for us in America. It was a piece of pottery that was dated 1799. Things like that, just making discoveries, working out my own life and my own interests. And I, to the present day, do that. That's always been primary in everything because it's foundational for me. Raising kids, that was a very interesting thing to do. Um, uh, Teaching, very interesting thing to do. Following interests as I go along. Sure, there was some necessity involved in that. Had to make money. But it was interesting work. I tried never to get to where something was dull. And as a result, were I to show you my work resume, my day job resume, you would see that the longest thing I ever did was kids media for 8 years at a throw, and then later on for 4 years. And in between, I've got stints of teaching high school for 5 years. I was a website designer at a hospital for 4. Currently, I'm a video, promotions producer for a television station. And I'm going to come on to year 5 for that. Don't know how much longer that'll play out. So everything is about pursuing my interests constantly. When I'm not doing that day job thing for money, I'm writing. I'm doing that. I might as well be in the woods. It's just that doesn't, being in the woods at this point isn't all that interesting to me. I spend a lot of time at it. I mean, there's very little out there that I'm going to find now that I don't already know is there. I don't know.
So your watercolor still is your greatest love.
Well, it comes first. Yeah, it seems to. It seems to. I've got a lot of other things. Like I've got oil paint and things like that going on over here, and acrylic, all of that I mix myself. But upshot for me, I guess I should stop doing this because it probably is making you seasick, for which I apologize. It all seems to come back down to watercolor. I'm sorry. Cheap camera. All right. There we go.
Okay.
It all seems to come back to watercolor for me. Yeah. Good question. I don't know. I guess I'll have to wait till I get there. I'm going to keep doing what I do. This just seems to happen, and it seems to be where I go. Um, so I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to keep working on screenplays and short stories, and I may write something longer than a short story, um, like a novel. That might be fun. And I'm going to keep painting because the painting just keeps happening. And drawing, doing a lot of drawing too. And on and off in various ways outside of that. Um, I messed around with fresco, which is a lot of fun. Um, Gosh, let me see, music. I've, you know, played with the guitar. I've composed songs. Um, Gosh, what else? I did a series of things on ViewMaster. Do you remember what a ViewMaster is?
Yes.
Okay. I found that there are companies that will take your images and make them into ViewMaster reels. So I did a series of those, short series. It's a bit work intensive. And it involves getting that stereoscopic effect. And of course, I did it with relation to the cartoon kind of post-pop art that I was making. And it was fun. I took a set of those with me to India, and I gave them to the other artists when I was there. That was really neat. So anyway, all kinds of things. If I haven't done it yet, it's just because it hasn't interested me yet. But it might. Oddballs. Oh, God. Well, let me see here. I gave myself some notes here. We've actually hit a lot of it. No, I would just urge people to try and shake the institutional bias that's imprinted on us through college and much of life, and to try not to look at art as a thing to make money. Okay. What am I talking about? I'm talking about contemporary fine art. Try not to look at making contemporary fine art as some kind of way to get into the stratosphere of some social world, or to be the next Basquiat or something like that. That universe is gone, incidentally. The fine art world now is much different from what it was in the mid 20th century. I would urge you to think about art making as a vocation. Pardon me. We have family things that I'm dealing with. All right. I would urge people to consider to look at art making from a vocation and to follow the same intuition that got them started, that got them interested in making art in the first place, the first drive. that first drive is more than sufficient to carry them through anything they'll ever want to do. If they're honest, if they're good to it, and if they're honest with themselves. And they'll find that following that drive will help them be the most like themselves, the best version of themselves that they can be. And it's pure and kind of perfect in its own way. And that would be the best advice I have to offer to anybody who's going into this kind of thing. And as far as anybody who has an interest in what I do, I gotta say, I gotta question that. What's wrong with you is my first question, but that's not really true. I'm just open to questions and to inquiries if anybody's interested in looking at things. I've got rooms full of work, and I'm glad to break it out. I'm open to studio visits if people want to give me a call.